Hi, my name is Beth and I'm the sewing pattern designer and blogger at Sew DIY. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to add a recessed zipper to my bucket tote pattern. The bucket tote is my latest pattern and it features an oval bottom with pleats at the sides and a wide opening at the top. I have a full video sew along here on YouTube that you can check out to learn how to sew the bag. And today we're going to be using some of those elements and adding a new piece to the pattern. As written, the pattern is a normal tote with just an opening at the top. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to make a bag like this with a recessed zipper, so a zipper that is dropped down from the top and invisible when you're just looking at the side, plus a big shoulder strap like this with an adjustable slider. The way the recessed zipper works is that we make the lining a little bit shorter. We add some pieces of the exterior fabric at the top and then sew this zipper in between. And on either side of the zipper, we have extensions, and that will make the top of the bag a little bit wider than if we had the zipper directly in the top fabric. So you'll be able to put more stuff in your bag and keep it closed and secure. Most of the construction is the same except for the lining where we'll be adding this zipper. I'll have all the details for what you need to cut down in the show notes and on the blog. Plus I'll have a list of all the supplies you'll need to sew this bag. Here I have all my fabric cut out for the tote, and for my exterior fabric I'm using this black kind of chevron print, and I have the body and bottom cut out and interfaced just like normal. So I will set these aside, and then from that same fabric I have 4 different strips of fabric, and 2 of them are going to be used to inset the lining a little bit, and then with these 2 shorter ones the zipper is attached to these pieces. So the longer pieces, which are going to become part of the lining, are 22 inches long and 2 1/4 inches tall. These 2 pieces for the zipper are 17 3/4 inches long and 2 3/4 inches high. Then for my lining, I have 2 strips that are the same size as the pieces for my zipper, and these will be underneath the zipper. So again, these are 17 3/4 inches long and 2 3/4 tall. Then the bottom of the lining is cut the same, but for the tote, I reduced the length of the tote because we are going to be attaching these strips on the top. So we need to make it a little bit shorter. So I cut the lining 1 1/4 inches shorter than the pattern. I'm also going to move down the zipper placement. So normally it would be up a little higher, but I just took the pattern and adjusted it down. For the recessed zipper, you want a zipper that is at least 17 inches long. The one I'm using is 18 inches, but the longer your zipper, the more your bag will be able to open. So a 20-inch zipper is even better. And you don't need to worry about shortening the zipper. The excess will just hang off the side. In today's video, I'm only showing the construction related to the recessed zipper. I'll be skipping over sewing the exterior of the bag and the welt pocket in the lining. We're going to start by attaching the slider to one end of the webbing. So stick the webbing up through one side and over the center bar and down the other. Then we want to stitch this close to that center bar. So I will fold in my webbing so that all of the raw edges are hidden, and you can use the adhesive tape to hold this in place or use clips. And then we just want to stitch this in place. To secure the webbing to the slider, I'm going to stitch back and forth through all the layers using a straight stitch. I'm using a zipper foot so that I can get closer to the slider, but you can also make a bigger overlap in the webbing. Okay, and now this slider is attached to my webbing. Now we're going to attach the rest of the hardware to the strap. Start by sliding one hook onto the webbing. This hook does not get stitched in place. That way it can move freely when we move the slider on the strap. Next, take the loose end of the webbing and weave it through the slider over the top of the part that we top stitched. Finally, slide the second hook onto the end of the webbing, fold in the raw end, and clip it in place. Our last step is to stitch this end of the webbing next to the hook. To secure this hook, I'm going to use a straight stitch and stitch twice over this folded edge. Using a zipper foot can help you avoid banging into this hardware. And this is a lot of thick fabric, so stitch slowly and use a larger size needle. This stitching should be fairly secure as is. If you want, you could move the needle to the left and stitch another row closer to the hardware. The D-rings are attached to the bag and they are held in place with a piece of webbing. And what you want to do is slide your webbing through the D-ring, get the raw edges even, then do a little top stitch across to secure the webbing. So I'm going to top stitch my D-rings, and this is usually easier to do with a zipper foot. You can adjust the position of the needle if needed. I am using a regular straight stitch, and I will stitch across and then back to the other side. And now this webbing is secured and it'll be easier to sew onto my bag. Here I have the exterior of the bag all sewn. The bottom is attached. I have my pockets. And before I attach the lining, I want to baste my D-rings to each end of the bag. And this is where the strap will attach. The webbing on here is pretty long, so you can decide at this point how long you want this D-ring to be when the bag is finished. So remember that we have a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and you can kind of test and see what you like the look of. And I will probably position mine so that they are a little shorter when the bag is finished, something like this, about 1 inch long. So I have a pin in my bag where the single notch is, and this is right in the center of the side panel. And I want to center my D-ring on top to the length that I want. And then I can hold it with clips. It's going to be a little too thick for pins. And then I want to baste right along here, and ideally do it just a little bit less than 1/2 inch so that you don't see that basting on the wrong side. I'm using my regular presser foot and kind of a medium stitch length between a basting and a regular stitch, just a 3.2 length. I'm now ready to stitch these flaps to my zipper. And I have 2 pieces cut from my exterior and 2 from my interior. And when it's all sewn together, they will be layered up with the wrong sides together and attached to either side of the zipper. Then these raw edges are going to get sewn into the lining of the bag. These pieces are a little bit shorter than my zipper on purpose. This end of the zipper is just going to hang free. So I have gone ahead and pressed in the seam allowance on each end of my little flaps, and I'm using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And I always like to baste things first, especially when I'm going to have 2 layers of fabric. So I'm setting my lining pieces away for now and starting with my exterior fabric. I'm going to turn my fabric wrong side up and pin it to the zipper. And the important thing is to have that folded edge just past the zipper stop. And you can also fold this excess zipper tape out of the way. So on the back side, the zipper stop will be right next to that folded edge. And then when you pin it or clip it, you want to fold the zipper tape. So you can start with getting that zipper aligned and then just pin down the edge. And you want to make sure that you have the right side of your fabric against the right side of the zipper. I have unzipped my zipper so that it's easier to handle, and I'm using a pin to hold back the top of the zipper tape. I have my machine set up with a zipper foot, and I'm using a long straight stitch, otherwise known as a basting stitch. I'm keeping the edge of the zipper tape aligned with the edge of the fabric,
and stitching right down the middle. You may find that it's easier to move your needle to the left or the right depending on your type of zipper foot. You want to make sure that you like the stitching that you did and there aren't any wrinkles in the fabric. Then grab one of your lining pieces of fabric and we're going to put it right side down. So we can hold this other side of the zipper out of the way, align the ends and this long raw edge, and you can use clips or pins to hold it together. And this time we will stitch with a regular length stitch right over where we did the basting. I've adjusted the length of my stitch back to a regular stitch length, and I am now going to stitch through both layers of fabric and one side of the zipper, stitching right over that basting line. Okay, I have pressed the fabric away from the zipper teeth, and now I'm ready to attach this second set to the zipper. So again, I will start by basting the exterior fabric to the zipper tape. And when I do this, I just want to make sure that I have it lined up the same way that I did for the first set. So I don't want to have my second set kind of lower down or higher. I want to get it as close as possible to the same placement as the other set. So again, I will baste the first one, then stitch it with the lining attached. Here I have the flaps all sewn to my zipper and pressed away. So there's the lining on the back side and the exterior fabric on the right side. And now I need to top stitch. So I'm going to top stitch the folded edges along the zipper and then down the other folded edge and do it for both sides. And you don't need to stitch along the raw edges. So you'll want to use some pins or clips and line up your folded edges, because remember, we haven't sewn these yet. Just line those up, and I try to make sure that the lining is folded in so I can't see it from the right side. All right, I'm going to top stitch this using a straight stitch with a 3.0 length. I'm also using my zipper foot so that I'm not running over the top of my zipper. You may find that it's easier to stitch with the zipper open. You'll have to experiment. And I have also moved my needle over to the right so that I can stitch closer to the edge. Okay. And when you get to the corner of the fabric, you will want to leave your needle in the down position, lift the presser foot, and turn the fabric. And the same when you get to the other end, you'll want to stitch to the corner and then pivot down the final side. Here I have the two pieces of fabric that are the recessed part of the lining of the bag. And I just need to sew these short ends together. So I'm going to put them right sides together, pin the ends, and then stitch with a 1/2 inch seam allowance right down each short side. Here I have the 3 sections of my lining. This is the recessed portion of the lining that is the top of the bag that you can see when the zipper is closed. And then here is the zipper with its little flap extensions. And here is the lining. And I have marked the centers of each of these pieces of fabric with pins. And I did color code them, so I have 3 that are purple and 3 that are yellow, and I need to match those up and sew it together. But whenever I am sewing 3 pieces of fabric together, I like to baste 2 of them first and then add the 3rd one and do the full stitch. So we're going to put this section aside for right now and just baste the zipper flaps to the lining. So when you pin these together, you want to make sure that you have the lining fabric against the lining fabric. So my lining is this blue color, and I want to match those together. It doesn't matter which direction the zipper is going because the bag is reversible, kind of back to front. So one center of the zipper is going to align with the seam, and the other side will align with the center of the lining, and there will be 2 notches at this part of the pattern. So you just align the centers and then Keep your fabric flat and pin it together all the way down. And you can use either pins or clips. And repeat for the other side. I also recommend opening the zipper for stitching these seams because it will give you a little more room to sew. I am basting this seam with a straight stitch and a 4.0 length, and I'm using a slightly smaller seam allowance, so just under 1/2 inch. And the objective with this line of basting is to hold these layers together and secure them in the correct position before we attach the top part of the lining. Okay, I have my zipper basted in, and before we stitch it to the top of the lining, I recommend checking that you don't have any wrinkles and that you placed it evenly and symmetrically in your lining. And then I have marked the center points of my lining and this top part of the lining. So on the pattern, there are single notches on the sides, and those single notches align with the seam in this extension of the lining, and then the double notches will go in the middle. So I need to put these right sides together. So generally I like to match the 4 center points and then pin in between them. This will help make sure that you have everything pinned evenly. And then after you get this all pinned, we're going to sew all the way around the top. We're stitching this seam with a straight stitch and a regular length. There's nothing too tricky about it except for stitching through all the layers. Here's our lining all sewn. So you can see at the top of the lining is the exterior fabric, and then inside you see the lining fabric. So the last thing I want to do with this seam is grade the seam allowance. So I'm just going to trim these down so it's not one hard line, and it will be a little bit smoother of a transition. So I'm trimming the lining a little shorter, and then if possible you could trim the zipper flaps a little shorter. And then I'm going to press the seam allowance down towards the lining. I have marked the center points on my exterior and my lining just like I did for the lining. And I will put my exterior inside my lining so the right sides are together. And then I want to match up all of these center points and pin these top edges together. You want to make sure that the handles and the zipper are out of the way. We're only going to stitch through the fabric and through the webbing of the D-rings. I am stitching this with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and because the fabric is heavy, I recommend holding up the bag with your left hand while you stitch, and that will help make sure that the bag doesn't pull away from the needle as you're stitching, and you'll be able to maintain a more consistent seam allowance. Okay, here I have the lining stitched to the exterior, and I graded the seam. I cut the lining part shorter, and I'm going to pull it right side out through this hole. This is exactly the same as what's in the instruction booklet. If your fabric is very thick, you can use the drop-in method of attaching the lining to the exterior, and you won't have to fuss with pulling the lining through an opening. I demonstrated this alternate method in part 5 of the sew along. I'll include a direct link to that video in the show notes. So then you want to push the lining inside the exterior, and you want to give this a good press and then top stitch around the top. Again, don't top stitch over the handles. And then here I have my strap all finished, and I can connect it to my D-rings. I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions, and if you haven't already, I'd be so honored if you hit the subscribe button and then the bell to be notified of future videos. And if you don't have the pattern yet, there's a link down in the show notes. Happy sewing!